Thank you again for attending one of our Parent Information Network webinars. Tonight we are talking about officiating with one of the Arizona region's best officials, Kailee Jodarski Rowe. Kailee played at Arizona High School and Club here in town. She was started officiating at the age of 16 years old through a program called the JODP, which she will actually be bringing up later in the presentation. She earned a national scorekeeping job in 2019. She became a junior national official in 2023, an NCAA women's postseason line judge, and she is currently the Arizona region officials assigner. She's the one that sends the officials to their next job. So Kailee, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Talk about a little bit about your past, how you got to where you are, all those good things.
I started playing club at the mere age of 9. And when it came down to it, I had a bunch of injuries in my high school career, and that led to it wasn't smart for me to play anymore. When I was about 16, and my mom had started officiating, and we felt like it was one of my first jobs. I did have another job at the time, but it was a good way for us to kind of have some bonding time, but as well as like it was a job, and it became a career for me, as it turned out to be. And yeah, that was just kind of how it all came to be.
Excellent. Okay, so you're going to take us through the life, the times, the tribulations of being an official, and not just in the region, but kind of all over the country. Can you explain the duties of what an official does?
So the soundbite, as we like to call, is we are there to observe and facilitate. If you don't notice in the match, we're doing our job correctly. We're there to facilitate the match. When it comes down to it, making those split decisions that, okay, yes, this way versus that way. But for the most part, the teams know, okay, the ball landed on the court, we move on, we go to the next point. But as an official's job is to facilitate warm-ups, to facilitate any weird situations, mitigate time delays when injuries happen, or I've had players who just run off the court randomly because something spooked them. So like dealing with not necessarily crises, but keeping the day going so that nobody's there until really late in the day. But overall, creating a very safe and inviting environment for our athletes to play. And this comes to a part of the rules, making sure that that the game is being played fairly and to the methods and to the madness behind the rules, so that everyone can play to the best of their abilities. So
okay, yeah, that seems fair. I like the idea that you said if an official's doing their job, you really don't notice them. And also the flip side of that is you don't get very much credit when tournaments are running smoothly and matches are done well. Very rarely will parents or a coach come up and go, hey, you did a great job. It's usually the other way around, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So when an official comes on a court at a tournament, can you kind of go through a checklist or a timeline of what happens from the start of that moment until the match is over? All the things that you're thinking about that you have to take care of, that's your duties as you go through this match.
So if we're talking about in a club format like we do here in the Arizona region, because depending on the level of play, the age of the athletes, the skill level of the athletes, it's all a little bit different. Typically your officials, so we like to say our first start time is 8 a.m. in the morning. Our officials are encouraged to be there by 7 a.m. in the morning. There are 2 different waves, so they need to arrive at least an hour before the first start time. And that start time is important in the fact that that is when the first service is supposed to take place. And this is where time management is really important as an official. But the first serve of the first match should start at 8 a.m., which means that prior to that, we have to conduct a coaches meeting, a parent meeting 30 minutes prior to the first match. In that time frame, officials are responsible for checking the nets, checking the equipment, making sure it's safe for our athletes, meaning that that there's no exposed metal on the exteriors of the nets, that the poles are properly padded, the ref stand is properly padded, that we have not only 2 playing teams, because we don't always have all of those, we have 2 playing teams, that we also have a reffing team that's going to be helping us the first match. A lot of times we run into that traffic has happened or something like that, and the team is late and we have to kind of restructure or anything like that. But we have to check the ball. Believe it or not, the ball has a proper PSI that we check before the start of any game or any tournament. We check to make sure that the antennas are there. I've been to places where antennas just didn't exist. Antennas are a part of our rules. We check those. We want to make sure that our athletes are properly equipped, means that they're not wearing anything that could endanger themselves, their teammates. We also are very weird. We like to, as an official, when it comes to, when you get to those higher levels, how the jerseys are, what the jerseys look like actually play a part into if at a quick glance I can tell who our live is or who's a regular player or which numbers or anything like that. So we need to make sure that players are properly dressed according to the rules. Conduct warm-ups. So like we said, our first match time is 8 a.m., which means that all of the warm-ups need to be completed. Now, if it's any teams, A or B, that's how we refer to teams. A team on my left is A and a team on my right is B. If either A or B have not played that day, they are required to get a 5-minute shared time on the courts, which means that both A and B have their side of the court that they can pepper, pass, do whatever they want to with that time. Then after the coin toss and conducting a captain's meeting at the court. So there's a difference between a coach's meeting and a captain's meeting. Captain's meeting is with our players and describing what any weirdness could be going on as far as the courts, if there's a court nearby or if there's a wall or something, or the ceiling rule is another thing we have to go over a lot. But that's the captain's meeting. In the captain's meeting, we have our coin toss, which then determines who has serve and receive, or side if a team so chooses. So just for example, team A on my left has serve. They have their 4 minutes individually by themselves. And then we have 4 minutes for B after that is concluded. Whichever team has their 4 minutes, it is their 4 minutes solely to be on the court. The other team cannot be warming up anywhere else during that time. They can't be on the court. They can't be off the court warming up. It is individual time is what it's called. So all that math concluded, that's for 8 minutes and shared, and then another 5 beforehand. So we like to do our captain's meeting at least 15 minutes before the first start. So if we do our jobs properly, we'll have our captain's meeting prior, all the warm-ups will start, and then it's like, and when it's all done properly, like magic, all the teams start playing at once, and you'll hear the little handshake cheer all happen at the same time, which is fun when that happens.
Nice. So at that point, you go up into the ref stand, and can you explain what like R1 and R2? Because I think a lot of parents don't know what those are.
Yes, and something else I forgot to mention that we have to do prior to the start of any match is we have to talk to our ref team. A lot of in our junior matches or in the easy region, we have a ref team that we have to talk to our line judges, make sure that they're equipped with the knowledge that they need to in order to make a proper call. And if we have a player R2, same thing there. Sometimes I double check with the coaches, make sure that they've got everything. And you also have to double check that your score sheet, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that they are prepared to handle the bare minimum of what it is to score a match. But yes, the difference between an R1 and R2, and again, depending on like college R1, R2 is very different than our juniors division R1, R2. Sorry. So in a proper collegiate match, if you watch those, the R1 is responsible for they're responsible for ball handling, making the decision for and everything like that. The R2 is there to support them and handle with any difficulties or conversations with coaches. It's very exactly the same as we do in juniors, is that R1 and the coach are not going to have direct cross-court conversations. So the R2 steps in college to mitigate conversations a little bit more in that way. But in collegiate R2, they're responsible for the net. They're responsible for players contacting the net, players committing a centerline fault, and also managing substitutions, timeouts, and everything like that. And if the scorer has any issues, the R2, it's also under their responsibility. In region, the R1 not only has to handle all of the in-out final decisions like in college, as well as handling, which ball handling is judgment, which we'll talk about a little bit later what judgment is. But in terms of the level of play is where judgment comes into play. The R1 is still responsible for that in juniors, but also a lot of times they handle some of the R2's responsibilities just because you don't have a formally trained R2. So R1, very basic, that they make the final decision on points, and they also make the final decision on unique situations that could happen. Like say a team has a wrong server, who gets the point, such and everything like that. The R1 is supposed to be the most knowledgeable person on the court when it comes to the rules, and the R2 supports the R1 and kind of is a second pair of eyes in terms of juniors when they're not formally trained.
Okay. And the other jobs that parents, athletes would do during a match would be a libero tracker, flipping the score, and doing lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We have our line judges. That again, a line judge supports the R1 in making those closer calls that might have been blocked or anything like that. Sometimes some pancake situations are where line judges shine specifically, and calling antenna faults on not only the ball but players too is where line judges, they have the best angle. They may not, and you might run into that a line judge gets a little bit eager and calls something a little too quickly. We see that a lot in juniors. So that's where the R1, being the most knowledgeable on the court, is supposed to, okay, know that in up, or they have the opportunities to overrule. Yeah. So yes.
And how much training do the kids get? Like before the season starts, how much time and training do they get?
They get an hour training. Unless their coaches do anything on their own or separate, they are required of 1 hour of training per the region, where they'll spend an hour doing either or. They'll either learn how to score and lip track, or they'll spend an hour learning how to R2 and line judge. And that is the bare minimum requirements before they go into it. Some head coaches do a little bit more on their part of teaching them how to properly sub and everything like that, which when they know how to properly sub, that makes them a better R2 because they know the kind of the ins and outs of it. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would also say too, very often I'll see officials like yourself, like you'll help the kids, and you might be off a match and I still see officials walking around and helping kids. So it's a constant process. If you've been doing it, if you're 10, 11, 12, and this is your first time doing it, it's rough. It's just rough. And that's where an R1 is really, really important. But if you've been doing it for 4 or 5 years and you're playing at 16s or 17s club, I'm assuming you have reffed hundreds of matches in your career and it becomes kind of second nature. So, but I would assume parents that can be parents, are still yelling and screaming at 11 and 12-year-olds for bad calls, right?
Yes, and there are people who, and again, if we're speaking like collegiate level, there are people who their sole job is to line judge and they love it and they are the best at it. They know how to move properly to get into position to see the ball at all times, which our little ones don't have that reflex quite yet.
Yeah.
I have it, knowing the calls as a line judge is fairly easy. Sometimes it's, and we as officials, our cadre of officials, as we like to call it, have discussions about like the most right call. So yes, the player, or so for example, if a ball were to pass outside the antenna, or like line judge, like the most right call is to point and wave with the flag, like an antenna fault. Some of our line judges just go out, like they know that is out, but it's not necessarily a proper call, so that we'll run into that sometimes too. Same thing in that same situation when a player quote unquote shanks the ball over the net. A lot of our players like to make the touch call, but it is actually an out because it crossed the center line. So our professional line judges know the difference. Our younger ones don't, and it is part of the R1's experience, and it's part of their job to kind of decode what they're trying to tell us. And sometimes that's when you'll see the younger line judges they'll be called in just to confirm, like, hey, you were trying to tell me this, right? And they're like, oh no, this was what I was trying to say. Like the ball did this, and then we get it all squared away.
Gotcha.
But yeah.
Okay. So when you're in the ref stand and the match is going on, there's a lot of stuff you have to take in and watch and look at. Officials don't really get a chance to kind of zone out. Like they have to be on constantly, every point, every serve, every touch. Can you talk about when you're in that ref stand, all the things that you're kind of having to help and oversee, and like you said, judgment calls, making calls, things like that?
Yeah, so it really happens. It happens more than just during a point. The things that we're looking for, or that we're supposed to be looking for, and again, as days go on and we get tired, sometimes fatigue sets in. But while the ball is not in play, everyone's kind of waiting around, which is a matter of seconds. You should be looking that no team is trying to make a substitution, that the players are aware of where they're supposed to be going. Like, oh, I'm in the front row, I need to now rotate up there. I'm making sure that there's no safety situations where, I don't know, say a parent decides to set up their camera right in the service zone, which service zone is playable area. Unlike in other sports where out is out, we can still play in the out. So I might like, do you mind moving this or something like that? I'm looking for all of those things, making sure a younger sibling isn't running on the court. I've had that happen way too many times. I'm also double checking that nobody's tying their shoe, that my scoring table, my scorekeeper looks like they've got a handle on it and they're not stressed or anything like that. I'm double checking to make sure that they're looking, make sure that my R2 is ready, because if my R2 is distracted by something, I don't want to start a point without them. I want to make sure that my line judges are attentive, because as soon as that serve happens, it's their job. It's game time for them. So those are all just a handful of things that we're looking at before the point happens. I also need to make sure that the ball that we're playing with is actually in the playing area. Far too often we have the ball roll away, or we can't find it because it gets put in someone else's ball cart. So we have to make sure we have the ball. I have to make sure I have a server. Sometimes if the ball gets shanked to another court, my server's the one who runs off and go gets it. I have to make sure that they have a deep breath before they can serve the ball. But that's happening all before. Once I beckon for serve, which is the whistle this way, once I beckon for serve, I'm looking for a foot fault. I move on. I watch the first contacts, second contacts, looking for second contact for for ball handling and judgment. I look at my third contact, who's it going to be, where's it coming from, then I move my attention to the net. I watch my blockers go up and down, making sure that there's no faults, net faults or centerline fault there. I move on to my next contact and so on and so forth. And then once the point is dead, say the ball lands in the middle of the court, I'm going to double check. I whistle saying that the point is dead, but I might do a double take of my line judges, like, yes, that ball did land in. Like I said, the line judges sometimes have the best view when it comes to pancakes for situations like that. So just a double check of my line judge. I'm going to make sure that my coaches see that I did blow the whistle and stop. Sometimes me blowing the whistle does not always stop play. Players like to play. That's what they're there for. So making sure that play does actually stop, that people know who's getting the right point, that my scoring table acknowledges who's getting the point, that my flip chart acknowledges who's getting the point. Sometimes they take a little bit longer than my score, but the flip does get involved. I double check all of those things, and then we start the cycle over again.
Wow. And so that's literally 30, 40, 50 times a set, not a match, a set. And then you got another set. Yeah. So, wow. Man, that's a lot. No wonder you're tired at the end of the day. Holy cow. So at the end of the match, once you've called the winner, you come down off the ref stand. What are your duties at that point?
So if it's the second match of the day, I'm immediately starting my watch to the 5 minutes because new teams are coming on. They haven't played yet. They need their 5 minutes shared. If it's not the second match of the day, I'm going to come down. I'm going to tell my ref team, thank you, so on and so forth. I'm going to double check that we have a winning team and everything like that. And I'm immediately going to call for captains for my next match. And then, okay, you have serve, you have receive. Okay, your 4 minutes is right now and you're off. And then after my warm-ups get on, I'm going to check my score sheet. I have to verify that the results on the score sheet are correct. I have to verify not only that verify that it's the winning team, the correct winning team. I have to check the set score and the individual point scores for each set, and that is filled out properly. Using AES in the AZ region is phenomenal, but with that, I need to make sure that my results are more correct than maybe in the past, where I didn't have someone else checking me and it instantly uploading to a website where anybody can review those results too. It is a nice double check. I have had times that the set score was wrong, that it was the right winning team, but the set score, it was 2-1 instead of 2-0. But I check that. I have to go turn in my score sheet and then go grab a new score sheet. Each score sheet is, again, because of AES, has a unique identification code on it. So I have to get the exact score sheet for that exact match. Otherwise, it causes issues, and we have to track down the right score sheet or make adjustments and things of that nature.
And then the whole process starts again.
Yep.
Yeah. And AES, so people that or parents that may or may not know, stands for Advanced Event Systems. And what it is, it's a computer program that the region is paid for that allows us to put match results into a computer program that parents can follow along. They can literally watch as soon as a match is done. They can see what their team does next, if they're off or ref or play again. And then at the end of the day, they can actually see where they finished in the pool, and then later on where they're at, depending on the division. So it's expensive, but we feel it's a really good customer service tool for our membership. So can you go over, and this might require you having to stand up, but can you go over some of the pretty much most of the hand signals that parents would see you do in a match and what they would mean?
So I like to go in order of just how we will do things. So we have our beckon for serve, which my hand is going to extend outwards towards the server, comes all the way across to my opposite shoulder. This is accompanied with a whistle, like it is now saying you are allowed to serve. So then that's the most basic one. We have, so the result of a point, there are a couple things. So we have our dead ball in signal is going to be down, goes down towards the court, whichever team it was. If it's done properly, it's always the team who faulted. So if I award the point this way, so we always award the points, and then accompanied by the fault signal is always the opposite side. Another example, so I award the point to this team for a touch, which means that the goes off of a player and lands out on their own side. Is going to be this for if this team had faulted over here, and then this team over here. It kind of we like to call it just it's a little sweep of the hands over the head. This just means that, again, their side of the court, they touched it and it landed out. Now we have our out, which means the opponent was the last person to contact the ball. The ball landed out, which is like our football goalpost situation here. We have our net signal, and net signal is very close related to a center line, which we'll talk about. So if team on my left gets the point because a player on my right side contacted the net, I'm going to give the point, motion at the net, and then I'm going to kind of direct with my hand which player it was who contacted the net. Most of the time, the coach can figure out like, hey, it was that one. Sometimes I give a secondary number, or they'll verbally say 8 or something like that, and I'm like, yes, it was this one. That is a little bit different than high school, where high school is immediately accompanied with numbers. So it would be point, net fault on player number 10. A single fist is 10 in high school, which is a little bit different and confusing. Club versus high school, where club it's just going to be at the player, net then at the player. Center line fault. It's a center line fault, but then also the ball itself passing underneath the net and contacting the player's court. So I pass the ball, it flies in that open space underneath the net and then lands on my opponent's side. Or a player, their foot crosses the center line, which is a center line fault. It's going to be a single finger, index finger towards the net, which looks from the angle looks very similar to net fault. So those are some common ones. Our substitution, simply overturn. A lot of time in basketball, officials would refer to it as traveling. So what our substitution is simply interruption in the game, just so someone comes into net, can come in and out. We have our timeout, which is directed at each team whenever they're taking it. And then as far as ball handling goes, we have kind of really 3 ball handling signals. So we have our double signal, which is just 2 fingers spread, is when a single player attacks the ball consecutively, intentionally or not. And I like to call this one out because it's even coaches get this one a little bit confused, because in high school it's different than in club, is that if I am the third contact, I am a hitter, I attack the ball into the net, and then I go and pass it out, even though there wasn't a blocker or anything there or anything like that, that is still a 2 contact, even though I was the third contact. So that's a little different in high school versus club, but that is a double. We have our 4 contacts, which is what that call would be in high school, is that the team did not successfully get the ball over in 3 contacts. And then our other ball handling call is going to be a catch and throw, commonly referred to as a lift, but in the letter of the rules, it is called a catch and throw, where my arm will come up from my side, looks a little bit like a down, but then my arm will lift up towards my shoulder, which is what a catch and throw is. Some other signals that as players get better and play becomes a little bit more advanced, we'll see a back row attack, which is, again, it's a little bit different high school versus club. So I'll show both of them. So in club, our back row attack is my arm extends up and then comes over. So a back row attack, which is very similar to a player reaching over, which means they extend beyond their side of the court over the net and interfere with the other team's ability to play the ball. That is called a reaching over, which is simply my arm will go here. Again, a back row attack, I will come up and over, and reaching over is just going to be straight across. We also have a back row block, which doesn't happen too often, but a back row block and the signal for screening, again, doesn't happen too often, is the opposite of out, where you're going to see my palms. Again, out is back palms, backwards, or backward block is forward palms.
Gotcha. Let's talk about one of the more unpleasantries of our sport. Yellow cards, red cards, and purple cards in the Arizona region. What do all of those mean, and what is the result of those if a official decides to present one?
Okay. So it's kind of in a little bit of a scale. We're going to go from most minor to it's kind of severe. So first we have our yellow card, which you'll see this in a number of ways. The most common one is a delay warning. Not necessarily a punishment of any nature, it's just a reminder to kind of keep going. We are on a time schedule. We have to keep up with time management. So we have if team A is my culprit, as you could call it, I'm going to do this, and then the yellow card is going to go over my watch. Again, time, it's going to be on the wrist. If it's on team B, again, it's going to be on the wrist. And they're just going to say, hey, it was too long to either sub, you're asking too many questions or something like that. Again, it's yellow card is always just a warning. We do sometimes use what we call a verbal warning, where you're not going to necessarily see a card. You're going to see kind of a conversation back and forth between the R1, the captain, and the coach. Again, it's just a little bit more informal. Like, hey, there's nothing wrong, just reminder, this is what we're doing. That's when you're going to see those verbal warnings. But when you see the card, it could be it could be some other things. Now, again, this is just a warning. If I'm giving, say, a conduct warning, it's simply just going to be the card by itself. I'm simply holding it, and then I'm going to call the captain over and explain this person did this, therefore I'm giving you a warning. Go tell your coach, and then they'll take care of it that way. Again, this is a warning. Kind of our, all right, we need to rein it in a little bit. So then we also have a red card. So again, we have a red card individually. Again, if it's a red card warning, which means that they've already got, a red card delay, which means that they've already had a yellow card delay, and they continue to do it. Again, it's going to be over the wrist and over the wrist, which is the delay does result. Anytime you see the red card, it results in a point for the opponent. And same thing for the misconduct, is you're going to see the red card by itself. You're gonna they're going to say what it's for, and they're going to call the captain over and explain the reasoning behind that. Now, we also, I have never had to do this during a match, and I hope to keep that streak alive, is that we will see a red and yellow card together, which means that player, that coach, whoever it is being removed from the set, which means that they need to leave for the time being. They need to sit down. So in a kind of a scale, we like to call this minor, rude, offensive, and then we'll get to aggressive here, which is in a little bit. But this is the removal of that individual for a set. If it's the second set, that just means the remainder of that set, they can come back in the third set. First set, same situation. Now, if we see the red and yellow card separated from each other, that is when we're going to have that they are removed from the match entirely. If this happens in the first set, they are not coming back. So that's what these are for. The only time that you will see, and just kind of shorthand a little bit, is when you see the red card by itself is the only time it's resulting in a point. If you see the yellow at all, there's not going to be any points given to an opponent or received. It's only red card individually. Now, if we pair this with a purple card, which is what we have in the region, so it looks a little bit blue depending on the light. Our purple card is specifically for spectators. And we say spectators because that could be parents, it could be grandparents, it could be siblings, it could be uncle who just showed up, or a friend of a friend of a friend who showed up and decided to play that, or decided to do something that day. Now, when it's the card, the red or yellow cards by themselves, it's directed at either a coach, assistant coach, or player, someone that we can record. If we have to pull out the purple card, it is not only a purple card to that individual, but it's to everybody who is a part of that team. So if I show again, yellow warning paired with the purple, means that not only do these parents, spectators, and everybody, they're receiving a warning, but also the team and the coaches as well. So if it's the purple is kind of the all-encompassing. It's a way to communicate who started the action or kind of started the ripple effect and why the card is being given. A lot of times we have these for just misconduct and not allowing individuals to be human beings. There's a lot of times when we're going to see this. And again, this is for everybody on this particular side. I could give it to the other side, and that means that everybody watching the match now has a yellow card against them, where individual is for that individual player, individual coach. Now, a purple-red card, again, red card means point. So if you see a purple-red card, it is a point for the opponent. Now, where this is different than just the red and yellows by themselves is it can be as many purple reds as it takes, because it is for everybody. It can be a purple red for the guy in the white shirt. It can be a purple red for the guy in the blue shirt, or the lady in pink. So as many times as it takes for the match to get under control. That's what our purple card is for.
And what would it take to give a purple card, a purple and a red? What would it take? Like, is it like a parent becoming violent? Is it a parent yelling and screaming specifically at, like, is there, what would precipitate that?
So again, where I like to use our scale, we have so we have minor, rude, offensive, and aggressive. If I feel I'm in danger is when we're going to see this. But minor means like, that was the worst call I've seen in my life. Okay, I am a little bit, I tend to tune it out myself. I've been at this long enough that I don't really listen to people. With some of our less experienced officials, they might be listening a little bit more. And again, it is up to them. Depending on the case and the situation, I've received that's a horrible call a lot in my life, and that's when this one's for is. But if I'm feeling threatened, or if it's directed or derogatory, it is going to be a jump to this. Where I might just immediately remove someone is if that behavior becomes threatening and aggressive, or in USAV, if we have this thing called a heroes form, which is specifically handling, and this form exists for a reason. It deals with the amount of harassment that some players, parents, coaches have experienced just at tournaments, like people making derogatory terms or language or anything like that. So that heroes forum exists purely because of harassment, and that's where threatening and harassing behavior is where I'm not going to allow that to happen. It doesn't make it fun for our players. It doesn't, or anybody else. So you will be removed from the site at that point.
Gotcha. Okay. I think there's a myth certainly among coaches, but among parents as well, that refs are biased against certain clubs, against certain teams, against certain coaches, things like that. I mean, everybody's human, but can you address that a little bit?
It is a myth. I can tell you, I have no stakes on who wins a single match or not. I am one of those officials where it depends on the official that you talk to, but some officials, they like to know the players, they like to know the coaches in and out of everything that they have going on, that they've been following their careers and everything like that. They know them personally. I like to, my preference is to show up and not know anything. These teams are absolutely even. I want to do my job, let them have a good day, and not the end of it. But we play far too often in the region. So it's like you get to know people, you see them over and over again. As far as a bias and if they win or not, no official has that. I might say that where the myth comes from is, okay, and this is privy to the inside of an official or R1 making those snap judgment calls like we were talking about before. Maybe my line judge isn't paying attention, or I see them kind of trailing off a little bit. I'm going to be wary, trusting whatever call that they have. If I truly have something different, I will overrule them. And that's where a lot of the misconception is, where sometimes I don't have any judgment. Maybe I was still looking at a different part of the play and the ball lands near the line and I didn't see the ball land. And then I just have to go with that line judge who may not have been giving it 100% of her attention, that they miss a call. We all miss calls. We can't see everything. Even our line judges, they've got a million things going on in their world, as much as we like to keep them honed in. So that's where it seems like if an R1 is just going one direction versus the other is where those misconceptions come into play. But no, it truly is the honest call that they saw in their judgment. Now, it brings us to, I might be going off the rails here a little bit, but it brings us to a point of this thing that we have called protests. Now, this is purely something that a coach can do when they feel that a rule is being misinterpreted, not necessarily because they disagree with the call. And where protests are a good thing to kind of a double check. I have accepted protests because an R1, again, they should be the most knowledgeable in the court, but an R1 either accepts or denies a protest. And I have accepted protests purely because I felt it would give the match some time to calm down and that they don't think it's just me picking on them. Like, no, this truly is the state of the rule. Maybe it was misinterpreted from the get-go for the coach of the team, but that's where the reason why we have protests is so that there are learning opportunities and things like that. And I tend to use those to bring in the match a little bit. But no, there's no bias. That purely if there's a conflict of interest, our officials, and again, I'm as the assigner and often a lead official, I have officials come up to me like, oh, my sister's kid is on that team. I shouldn't be repping this court. They don't put themselves in conflict of interest. And so often, more often than not, you'll see that situation. But yeah, the misconception comes from we're not necessarily taking accountability or not understanding what the official is trying to communicate.
Gotcha. All right, let's talk about something a little nicer. Tell me about the JODP. Arizona, I believe, was the first. region to institute this program. I think some other regions have followed suit, but can you explain the JODP? And it's actually how you got started. So
Yes. So the acronym stands for Junior Officials Development Program. I often just refer to them shorthand as a JO, so they're a junior official. And we say junior official just because that they are under the age of 18, that they can legally still be players within the region. That's why this program exists. Now, a JODP, like I said, is someone who's under the age of 18 that they clearly don't have all the experience in the world as some of our adult officials, but they know the rules because they're players. They know what in and out is versus trying to teach a basketball official what in and out is or anything like that. That they have, I refer to it as a player gut, that like oh, like they know where to look, because very often where you're looking as an official is exactly where you'd be looking as a player. You're anticipating the play and everything like that. So that's why JOs are very, very are a talent that we want to continue. But the program was developed within our region to allow players who look like or seem like they have a very good grasp of the rules and the concepts and everything like that, and allow them to work. So
they get paid, right?
Yes, they do get paid. They get paid a little bit different than our adult officials. They get paid per wave versus getting paid per match like our adult officials, just because there's child labor laws and everything like that. We want to pay them for their time, but we don't want to overwork them, and so forth. But yes.
What is their training involved?
Their training is just the same as an adult. They're not treated any differently other than their pay, and that they have what's called a mentor. So when you have JODPs at a particular site, you'll have more lead officials than, say, a regular site, that they're just there to handle crises and conflicts that we like to say the adults will take care of the adults, that if there is an issue on their court, that a lead official is free to step in and mitigate the situation so that the play can continue. But we do the same thing like that for adults, just we don't watch them quite as closely, I would say.
Right, and the JODPs are not officiating anybody their age or older, correct? It's all younger teams?
Correct, that's what we try and make that happen. We have some very experienced JOs who might get a little bit closer to their age, and just depending on how the brackets play out and where the court schedule is, we try to avoid that as much as possible. Yes.
Gotcha. And then officiating advancement. So let's say you start as a JODP like you did at 16. Now at 18, you're an adult and you can actually start getting match pay. So how do you work your way up the ladder to where you're the official that's, reffing the, Penn State, Louisville, NCAA final, last month? How does that work?
So we have a rating system. Say you have a player that falls into the track, like I did. I graduated the JO program, which means that I was in it for 2 years, and then before I moved on and became older than 18. If you graduate the JO program, you immediately jump from a JO to what is called a provisional. If you're an adult official and it's your first time officiating in the region, you have a rating of what is called probational. That just means someone should be watching you, teaching you the ropes a little bit more. So we have, again, so it's probational and JOs are very similar. Again, they're paid differently because of the age difference, but kind of the same level of skill and rating. So then after that, we have provisional, which means you have an understanding of the rules. We don't need someone there watching you, holding your hand type of situation. Those are provisionals. After that, we have what's called a regional, where regional officials, they've been around for some time. They know how to handle crises without getting without intervention from anybody else, and they know how to manage the court. They can fix score sheet issues if we have troubles with the score sheet. They are well equipped, and you can send them anywhere in the region and they would be successful. Then we have that's kind of where USAV, because ratings don't stop here in Arizona. We are part of USA Volleyball, and USA Volleyball is a national organization, so regional and below is monitored by the Arizona region. If you're registered as an official in the Arizona region, you're monitored by Arizona. But then once you become what is a junior national or a national official, those are then awarded and monitored by USAV as a whole, where a junior national official goes to girls nationals and participates in what's in a candidacy, where you're a junior national candidate. You were evaluated over a matter of 3 days, and you're critiqued. You're given scores and everything like that. You have to score a match and everything. There's a matter of steps you have to go through in order to receive a junior national, and then it's a very similar process for national, but it's just a higher level where you're a junior national and then you go for a national, which people who aim for a national intend to go towards what is an international, which means that they have aspirations to officiate professional.
Gotcha. Wow. And there's also beach officiating. There's also sitting volleyball officiating, para beach volleyball officiating. There's a lot of avenues to go if this is something that you really enjoy.
Yes, I have very limited experience with beach officiating. For the most part, the rules overlap. They also have minor changes, but yeah, I don't have too much experience. I actually have never officiated a Paralympic team before, so.
Oh.
I
Okay.
wouldn't even know where to start with that one. But yes, those are things.
Yeah. First of all, we're winding up here, and I want to thank you for your time and your explanation, your expertise. It's been excellent. If you had to come up with 3 or 4 big rocks that you wanted parents to take from your presentation, for example, one of them that I think we miss a lot is just how important safety of the athletes is, and a lot of the things that you guys do to make sure the environment and the players and the match is put on safely. That for me, that's a big rock that I think a lot of parents don't really understand or realize. But what would be, I don't know, give me 2 or 3 big rocks that you think you want parents to take away from what you've been talking about.
Piggybacking off of that, there's a rule for a reason. I know that sometimes we can be a little bit lenient and use our human being side of it, but people have done some dumb things, therefore we've had to make rules for them. So when it's making a call or using protocols is what we call them. If it's implementing a protocol outside of regular officiating, it's because people have been given an inch and they take a mile, and us as officials, we try to help minimize issues. So those rules are in place for a reason. And that's what we're going with for safety. Like if I'm asking you to move your chair, it's because someone has broken a leg before trying to run after things. Like those types of things happen. The bigger thing, if as a parent you tell everybody this, because I had to do this as a player all the time, telling other parents this. Whatever the score, which is different. So we have a scorekeeper, which is the person with the paper that sits at the desk. Whatever the scorekeeper has is essentially the letter of the law. That is what we go off of. If the visual flip chart is off, I don't care as an official. All I care is that my scorekeeper is not being distracted by people yelling at them. because they are most likely children and that they are still learning because there's a lot to go through. And if parents want to learn how to score, I welcome it. You can't necessarily score within the region unless you jump through some special hoops, but learn how to score because then you know what that scorekeeper is going through. I have taken away the flip chart before because that's what people only think matters. It's a lot harder to screw up the score sheet than it is to screw up the flip chart. But it's also easier to fix. So just know that if there's something wrong with the visual score, tell your coach. Your coach will take care of it. Most likely the coach has their own score that they're keeping. Fix that. Because that is I don't like to say pet peeve, but that's my number one thing that I hear most often, that if we could fix that, just know that the scorekeeper is the one who has the score, not the visual flip chart.
Nice. I'm gonna finish this up with this. All officials in the Arizona region are on your shoulders right now, and you could give one message to parents before we leave here. What would you want to tell parents?
Other than we're human, we are all a little bit different. We all have our likes and our dislikes. So everyone has a different journey. A lot of times people see me and not know that I've had 9-10 years underneath my belt, and they think that it's my first time reffing. You don't know where people come from, but at the same time, it could be their first time, and they're working through it, and they have a mentor in the distance watching them and helping them. You don't know where people come from. We take it from that point, and we move on. We're always learning. The game is always changing. I don't know if you know this, but rule changes every 2 years. Every 2 years, USAV goes back to the drawing board, says, how can we make this game better? And they do. And officials have to, we have to make a change. We have to make changes. We have to make adjustments. Even though that this word might have changed slightly, it might mean that we call the game a little bit differently. We saw that a lot happen during COVID and with the new NCAA changes. But you don't know where somebody is starting with. We're all learning. We all move forward, and I guarantee that they're giving it the best that they can.
Nice. Again, I say this as we're signing off to parents, but understand that there's literally 4 separate rule books for international, for USAV, for high school, for college. There's literally 4 different sets of rules. Officials are required to know all of them if they're going to officiate all of them. It's not easy. And the next time you're at a tournament, parents, go up and say thank you to an official and tell them you appreciate them, because they do an immense amount of work to keep your daughter or son safe. Kailee, I can't thank you enough. We appreciate your time and appreciate your expertise. Parents, be on the lookout for the next Parent Information Network webinar coming soon. Kailee, thank you so much. Everybody, have a good day.
Thank you.